we talking about practice. Not a game. We talking about practice.
Welcome everyone to another episode of After Practice with myself, Lake Lewis. It's Super Bowl time now. We know who's going to be in the Super Bowl. The Kansas City Chiefs versus the San Francisco 49ers. As of yesterday, the Chiefs were 1.5-point favorites. We'll talk about today on today's podcast on why I think that may be wrong. Right now, I'm going to let you know why I'm leaning towards the San Francisco 49ers to win this football game. I'll let you know why. Of course, we're going to talk about the Washington Redskins, the teams that I cover locally right here in the DMV area. We'll find out, literally what's going on at Redskins Park as far as what is this team going to do with the draft coming up. They have the number 2 pick in the NFL draft. Will they use it? Will they take a guy like Chase Young out of Ohio State, or perhaps will they trade out of that pick? I also think it depends on what the Cincinnati Bengals, who hold the number 1 pick, what they're going to do. So we'll talk about that as well. And then we'll open up some questions for you guys, as we always do. As always, if you want to follow me, if you want to follow this program, you can listen to it, subscribe to it on Apple, on Spotify, on iHeartRadio, just to name a few of the major podcast carriers. We're on pretty much everything. Deezer, Spreaker, you name it, we're on there. So check this out on those formats and subscribe to it. Get these numbers up for me. Also, if you want to follow me on social media, you can follow me on Twitter at Lake Lewis. You can follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Lake Lewis Jr. And then, of course, my company, Sports Journey, 2L Media Group Company. You can follow us on social media as well, on Twitter at Sports Journey and on Facebook and Instagram at Sports Journey Com. So make sure check out all the good people who are doing some great work, bringing you great coverage, pretty much of everything going on right now. It's up on the site, so we're excited about that. I thought this weekend's 2 conference championships games were really good. I mean, they were very compelling. You had different styles as far as the Tennessee Titans when they played the Kansas City Chiefs. But you saw Kansas City just have too much in the end. I mean, too much Patrick Mahomes, too much of that high-flying offense. And that's going to be interesting because they're going to play against the San Francisco 49er team that pretty much stepped on Green Bay. I knew that San Francisco was going to beat Green Bay. I didn't think they were going to beat them as bad as they did. I actually tweeted out, it was a back alley slapping. I mean, if you know what that is, we don't have to explain it, but let's just say Green Bay got punked. And San Francisco, just took it to them physically. They just took their manhood from them, and it wasn't close. So now we have a Super Bowl where we have 2 teams that have 2 different styles, but I think that you have to keep in mind Kansas City, perhaps they're favored. I don't think they should be, but I understand why they would be favored. They're, I guess, the sexier pick right now. They are the hotter team, believe it or not. I know San Francisco's playing at an all-world level, and their games haven't been that close. But Kansas City's the team that comes in there, 6-game winning streak to finish the regular season, and then they have 2 in the playoffs naturally. So right now they're coming into the Super Bowl with an 8-game winning streak. That's impressive. And you think about their last loss, ironically, was 35-32 against the Tennessee Titans back in Tennessee. So they avenged that loss this past weekend in the AFC Championship game. And I think it's safe to say since Patrick Mahomes has come back, he had a dislocated knee, he had an ankle injury. But since he's come back under center, they look like the team that we all thought they would be. I still, for the life of me, would have liked to have seen them play against the Baltimore Ravens. I just thought it would have been epic, to see a Lamar Jackson against a Patrick Mahomes, last year's MVP versus, I think, Lamar Jackson clearly will win the MVP this year. So you would have had a nice little matchup, 2 African-American quarterbacks, something that, I understand that we don't want to always have to bring up race and everything, but it was pretty compelling for me to see in the playoffs this year that you had quite a few African-American quarterbacks who have altered the way the game is being played at the quarterback position. Patrick Mahomes naturally jumps out. I mean, his arm is electric, but he made a play against Tennessee with his legs to just show that, he could do some more things. He just won't beat you in the pocket. with that magical arm, like I said, but he still can make some plays outside of the pocket with his legs. That was a great, great run. One of those playoff memories that if you watched and saw that happen live, you'll remember that for a long, long time. Lamar Jackson, what can we say? I mean, the guy broke Michael Vick's rushing record for a quarterback this year, shattered it actually, and also threw for over 3,000 yards. So he wasn't just a guy that was just running the football. He was putting it through the air as well. And I think if Lamar Jackson can get a couple more weapons on offense as far as a big play wide receiver, possession guy, not so much from Hollywood Brown, who's a big play guy, but more vertical. But I mean, if they can get a nice possession receiver in that offense, the Ravens could really take this thing to another level. Deshaun Watson, I mean, he made one of the magical all-time plays in the playoffs, in a playoff game this year. So there were guys in the AFC that were getting it done. And then over in the NFC, Russell Wilson, what can we say about him? He's another guy that I have said, take nothing away from Tyler Lockett and some of the guys that he's worked with in his offense, but he still is doing things without having a full arsenal, in my opinion, that if he had, a true just eating number one at wide receiver, what could he do? He's already won a Super Bowl. He's played in 2 Super Bowls. And I still say that team was always built on their defense. If they could add a couple more offensive weapons for Russell Wilson, he might be in the thick of things next year. I don't think going forward, and we'll talk about the Redskins shortly here, but I don't think going forward that if you're a fan of, the NFC, I don't think a lot's going to change next year either. I think that the really good teams are going to be good next year. I don't think Green Bay falls by the wayside. I don't think the Vikings fall by the wayside. I don't think the Saints are going to fall apart. Naturally, the 49ers are just going to get better and better. They may go into next year as a defending champion with a chance to repeat. They're that good and they're young, so they're only going to get better. You think of all these teams, these young teams, that are capable of getting better. The one thing that will be interesting to see is Aaron Rodgers will be another year older. I think he'll be 38, 39 at some point next year. Drew Brees over 40. So naturally, there may be a changing of the guard real soon in Green Bay and New Orleans. It'd be interesting to see if New Orleans keeps a Teddy Bridgewater. But nevertheless, I just don't think that those teams are going to fall apart. So as we transition, from the teams in the Super Bowl and talk about the Washington Redskins, who have that number 2 pick in this year's draft, what are they going to do? We'll talk about that here. But the Redskins, there should be hope for the Redskins. There should be hope for the Giants. There should be hope for the Dallas Cowboys. And the reason why I say that is because the NFC East in 15 years has had a different divisional champion the following year. So if you're the Eagles, sorry, that means that you more than likely won't do it unless you break that streak. And that's a big time streak. We're not talking 3, 4, 5 years. 15 years, 16 years, it's a long time. So it gives 3 other teams in that division who didn't make the playoffs a chance to feel like they can rebound. I think the San Francisco 49ers give people hope too, because what did they win, 4 games last year? This year, they're in the Super Bowl. It's just incredible to see what they've done. 13-3 on the year, playing that 12-4 Kansas City team. So excited about that. But the Redskins, folks, look, they're a team. And I know people are going to think I'm crazy by saying this, and I'm going to look into the camera and make sure I say this again. I think they're a team that's capable of having a 5-game turnaround next year. That would get them 8 wins. That means they would be an 8-8 football team. Maybe you get, a couple lucky bounces here or there. You steal a game or 2. Maybe you get 9 wins. Maybe you get 10 wins. I just know if you're at 8 wins, you're playing meaningful football in December in that division. If you have 9 wins or 10 wins, you're talking about trying to win the division. So I don't think it's far-fetched to think that they can't do that with the young talent they have in place. You look at the way they finished the year. Yeah, they won, 3 games on the year and lost their last 4, but they were very competitive. And that's something that I think, really jumped out to a lot of people. They were very competitive against some really good teams. I go back to the game in the rain against the 49ers. Yes, the 49ers that are in the Super Bowl we just talked about. The Redskins were tooth and nail with them. They played them very tough. It was a physical game. I understand the rain really caused havoc on both teams, but the Redskins showed me that they could compete, and they could compete at a high level against really good football teams. The Thursday night game in Minnesota, they competed. They stuck around for a while. And that was really before Dwayne Haskins had found himself. He got in the game. Case Keenum was knocked out. Dwayne Haskins got in, and he struggled. But the last 5, 6 games, you started to see some of these pieces come together for the Washington Redskins. I was really, really impressed all year long with Terry McLaurin, rookie wide receiver out of Ohio State. Had a Pro Bowl caliber year. Showed that he was their true number one that this team had lacked for a long time. Steven Sims Jr. came around. We saw him back in training camp, and I kept, looking at some of my colleagues and saying, man, this kid looks really good. He's special. And, at the time, Ike Hilliard, who's no longer with the team, I wish they had kept him. That's my guy, but I'm sure he'll bounce back on his feet somewhere else. But, I was talking with Ike Hilliard, and he said, man, this kid, Steven Sims, I was pulling for him, for the team to sign him as a free agent. Ike Hilliard really went to bat to get that kid here. Well, he kept saying that he can do some things, and he's not just a guy that's going to only make plays as a special teams guy. If he's given an opportunity, he can eat. And we saw that happen. He developed into their true slot guy, and I think he clearly is their starting slot guy going into next season. So you pair him along with Terry McLaurin, and Kelvin Harmon played pretty well down the stretch. So they had 3 young receivers that really came to the forefront, that really stepped up to go along with Dwayne Haskins, who really, really, really took some big steps forward as the season progressed before obviously he got injured against the Giants. But in the Giants game, first quarter, had a perfect quarterback rating. The game before that, after the first quarter, he had a perfect quarterback rating. And that's not just on 1 or 2 throws. I mean, he had thrown the ball 8, 9, 10 times. So you started to see him get comfortable. And it really would be interesting to see how he would do, with a full off season, full reps as, through OTAs, through minicamp, through training camp, through preseason. I think the sky's the limit for Dwayne Haskins. I really do. And I know some of my colleagues weren't really feeling that. And, we're kind of taking the kid to task a little bit. And I was a little disappointed in them for doing that. And I will say that. I have no problem saying that, because I just think that you can't weigh everything on a young guy that played one really solid year at Ohio State, big time college. I mean, threw 50 touchdowns. Most people don't get a chance to do that, let alone get a chance to do that at a heavyweight college like in Ohio State. So clearly the talent was there, and him being drafted in the first round was warranted. The way he was handled the early parts of, his career here in D.C. weren't good. And I'll flat out say that. I was a Jay Gruden supporter for a long time, but Jay lost me this year early. Lost me with the way he handled Dwayne Haskins, or the lack of, when he threw him out against the Giants, trotted him out in that week, 5 or 6 game against the Giants in New York in the Meadowlands. That was atrocious. And by the way, he really lost me that game when you deactivated Adrian Peterson. You just can't do stuff like that. You can't have a Hall of Fame back be in street clothes on the sidelines. There's no getting around that. So Jay Gruden lost me with that. Nevertheless, when Bill Callahan came in, I give him credit because I think he kept the ship afloat. He really let this team be themselves, but they were physical. They were more efficient in a lot of things they did. The penalties dropped. And I think that that's something that naturally should carry over with Ron Rivera, the new head coach. Ron Rivera is a disciplinarian. I go back to his press conference. He won me over, things that he said that he was going to do with this Redskins team. And I've been won over before by a lot of different people, but it just seemed like there was something different in the air at Redskins Park. And I know I've said that. I think you can probably quote me on that, going back to when Jay Gruden talked. I said there was something different in the air. I thought he was coming in to help Robert Griffin, RG3, and that didn't happen. But Ron Rivera is a guy that has proven that he can coach. Yes, there were some lean years the past few years in Carolina. However, you go back to his track record in Carolina. He had 2 NFL Coach of the Year campaigns. He had a 15-1 campaign where he took that team to the Super Bowl. They ultimately lost in the Super Bowl. I think I went to Denver Broncos. But still, they were a football team that had a lot of success. And they did it with defense. They did it with running the football. That's where I think if you're the Redskins, you look at what your MO can be. You look at the 49ers. You look at how they won that NFC Championship game. They ran the ball down Green Bay's throat. Jimmy Garoppolo, their quarterback, threw the ball, 8 times? You go over to Kansas City, Tennessee. Naturally, you thought Tennessee was going to be the team that ran the football. It was Kansas City. I was going to say Mike Holmgren. Oh, my God. Now we're really going way back. But Andy Reid decided, you know what? We're not going to make this a 50-pass attempt game for Patrick Mahomes. We're going to run the football. Patrick Mahomes, ironically, led them in rushing in the AFC Championship game. So if you're a fan of old school football like I am, there's still hope. There's still hope that the teams that got it, that got really far in the playoffs, run the football. 49ers run the football. Kansas City ran the football in the AFC Championship game. Naturally, Tennessee upset the New England Patriots on the road, the Baltimore Ravens on the road, with Derrick Henry running the ball down their throats. So there's still hope. If you're the Redskins, you have this really nice, young, talented collection of players on your defense that are going to go to a 4-3 next year. That could be really good for them. Then you pair that on offense with a young quarterback who's got a big-time arm, some young receivers that prove that they can make some plays, but your weapon, your main arsenal is going to be in your backfield. Adrian Peterson, Darius Geis. It'll be interesting to see if Chris Thompson comes back. I think his contract is over, but if I'm the Redskins, I really try to bring Chris Thompson back as well. If not, you have Bryce Love, who you drafted out of Stanford, who, had he not been injured at Stanford, this was a guy that, clearly was a first-round back. So the Redskins have him now that they can pair up. So there's going to be a lot of interesting developments with the Washington Redskins. Folks, while we're talking about what's going on in Ashburn, I want you to check out one of our sponsors, the good folks over at Andolini's Pizzeria. If you go to Andolini's in Ashburn and use the promo code SPOJO2020, it's short for Sports Journey, of course. If you go to SPOJO2020 and go in their store, mention that, you can get a couple discounted items. You can get a 1-topping large pizza and a 2-liter soda, as well as a 1-topping medium pizza with 5 wings. So check out the good folks over at Andolini's there. Remember, you can subscribe to this podcast, After Practice with myself, Lake Lewis. You can subscribe to this on Apple Music, on Spotify, on Google Podcast, iHeartRadio, you name it, we're there. Podcast Addict, we're on all of those formats. So check us out, subscribe to us. We're going to be starting to do this daily. There's going to be the audio format of this. Obviously, you're watching this, so you can check this out on sportsjourney.com, where you'll see all this stuff up here daily. We've got a lot of great stuff going on. So remember, check us out. We're going to talk about the Washington Redskins. Naturally, it's a team I cover. Soon I'm getting ready to announce, hopefully by tomorrow or Wednesday, where you can check out my Friday rendition of this when I host this with Washington Redskin starting right tackle Morgan Moses. Morgan, played through a lot of injuries this year, but he's a trooper. He always came through. So we'll have a chance to talk with him about the direction of the team and what he's thinking about the Redskins for 2020. Naturally, as fans, we always want you to come out to the podcast when we're local and on remote. Come on out. We bring you up on the set with us. We talk with you. We get your thoughts and have fun with it. We try not to make it too serious. We try to have a lot of fun with it. So this is what we do on this podcast. So remember, stay tuned with us here at After Practice with myself, Blake Lewis. Folks, as always, you can have a great pizza over at Andolini's here in Ashburn, Virginia. They've got some wonderful stuff there. I've eaten there on Tuesdays. They have specials. You can check them out on sportsjourney.com. Click on the link. It'll take you to their specials that they have going on. But Andolini's pizza is really good. And with the NFL playoffs starting this weekend and next weekend, if you use the promotional code SPOJO2020, you can get a 1-topping medium pizza with 5 wings for $12.99, or you can get a 1-topping large pizza and a 2-liter soda for $15.98. All right, welcome back. After Practice with myself, Lake Lewis, the podcast for you, the people. Check it out. We were talking about the Redskins and just, the talent that they have on defense, the running backs, the wide receivers. And, they have the number 2 pick in this year's NFL draft, and most people in the DMV are clamoring for the team to select Ohio State standout and just all world, edge rusher, linebacker, defensive end, whatever you want to call him. He can do it all, Mr. Chase Young. And he's from the DMV, played his high school football at nearby DeMatha Catholic. So a lot of people are, wanting to see Chase Young in a Redskins uniform. And, I'll flat out tell you, I want to see him in a Redskins uniform as well. There's several other guys that I think could help the Redskins. Perhaps you could trade out of the spot. But you just don't see dominant edge rushers of that caliber coming out of college every year. There may be guys that, some people, will give a title that they could be great. But this guy was proving it game in and game out. I mean, he was just terrorizing anyone that lined up against him. Teams were double teaming him. He still was making plays. And I think in today's NFL, you can't have, you can never have too many pass rushers. The 49ers are proving that now with their front four. You think of everything that they're doing, with Bosa and Buckner and all these guys that they have there, they're coming at quarterbacks. And if you're the Redskins, you can never have too many. I understand Montez Sweat had a really good rookie campaign. He came on really strong towards the end of the year. Ryan Kerrigan's a, perennial Pro Bowl guy, but he's getting up there in age. And you're going to a 4-3. You hope that a Ryan Kerrigan will never have to cover a tight end ever again in his life. So he's going to be a guy that's strictly going to be asked to maybe put his hand in the dirt and come around the edge, something he did when he was at Purdue. But think about it. You can have a rotation of a Kerrigan, Sweat. Ryan Anderson played really well this year and showed what he could do. And then if you add a Chase Young, that's 4 guys coming at you to go along with that front, defensive front that the Redskins will put out there. Matt Ioannidis, Daron Payne, Jonathan Allen, Tim Settle. I mean, there's a lot of pieces in place. And clearly, Ron Rivera being a defensive mind, he saw that. He knew that when he made the decision to come to the Redskins. He saw that there were already some young pieces in place. And they just now have to play. They just now have to put this thing together. Jack Del Rio will be the new defensive coordinator. So it's going to be interesting to see, how all this comes together. So do you draft Chase Young? Let me know your thoughts. If you watch this, I want you to go to Twitter. Let me know. Do you draft Chase Young or do you trade out of the pick? I'm going to put that poll up there today, and we'll find out what the results are. And on tomorrow's podcast, we'll let you know what the results are. But for me, for my money, I think right now you have to draft a young man. You're in a division that's going to have some quarterbacks locked in pretty much for a while. Daniel Jones is in New York. He's their quarterback of the future. Showed a lot of potential through 5 touchdowns against the Redskins this year in their final game. Obviously, Carson Wentz is, when he's healthy, and unfortunately he hasn't been too often, but when he's healthy, he's one of the premier young quarterbacks in the NFL, and naturally you think he'll get better next year. It would have been interesting to see how the Eagles could have played in the playoffs if Carson Wentz wasn't hurt, but he got knocked out early in the playoff game, and unfortunately they end up losing that game, with their backup coming in. So Dallas Cowboys, Dak Prescott, is he going to get a long-term deal? If he doesn't, I'm sure they'll probably franchise him, so there's no way that I see Dak Prescott playing for another team next year. I mean, they just hired Mike McCarthy, who's had some success as a coach with Aaron Rodgers, naturally in Green Bay with Brett Favre before that. So I'm pretty certain that, Mike McCarthy feels like he can work wonders with Dak Prescott, who is already having and already has been having a pretty productive start to his pro career. So if you're the Redskins, you want to wreak havoc against those 3 teams in your division. And what better way to do that than by, having pass rushers coming at these quarterbacks, making life uncomfortable for them. So yes, for my money, I say you hold on to the number 2 pick and you draft Chase Young. If a team calls you and they offer up 2 first-rounders and maybe a second, yeah, you have to entertain that, because when you only win 3 games, you have more than one hole to plug. And frankly, pass rusher isn't really the hole that needs to be plugged right now. I think the Redskins, for my money again, if you ask me if I can be GM for a day, where would I go? I already said I'd take Chase Young, but if not, I think you have to get a tight end in here. Jordan Reed is as great as Jordan Reed can be. talent-wise, those concussions have taken its toll. He missed a full campaign this year. He was hurt in the preseason game against Atlanta, and he missed the whole 2019 campaign. I don't know if missing the campaign makes it any better for him, with his history of concussions. I think Jordan Reed may have to retire. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a neurosurgeon. I'm not someone that's, clearly he's seeing to get a better opinion on this. But I'm sure that that's something that has to be on the table, and it's going to have to be addressed this offseason. But nevertheless, the Redskins still, if you're in position to get a game-changing tight end, you do that. Whether it's, free agency or whether it's in the draft early, the Redskins have to entertain a tight end. I think the other big question is Trent Williams. Will Trent Williams come back? For my money, I'm saying right now into this podcast, into that camera, I think Trent Williams will be back with the Redskins. I really do. But if he's not, and you need to find that out before the draft so you know how to draft, with Trent and Jordan for that matter, you need to have those situations rectified before the draft, because if they're not, then perhaps you have to use your picks on those guys. So yes, I think the Redskins need a tight end. They're probably going to need a left tackle. If Trent Williams comes back, that's not something you need at this point. I also think the Redskins need a cornerback. I like what Fabian Moreau did down the stretch. He showed by being moved to the outside that perhaps that's his true game. That's where he was in college at UCLA, and I think he was being severely underutilized, underused here with Greg Minuski's defense. Well, no more. They found a way to get him going on the outside. It'll be interesting to see if Josh Norman comes back. He did have a lot of success in Carolina under Ron Rivera, under that defense, where they let him play one side of the field. So it'll be interesting to see if they bring Josh Norman back. But for my money, I think the Redskins still need to look for a cornerback. I also think the Redskins may need to look for a safety. I've been a big proponent of Troy Apke. Yeah, you're going to say I'm a Penn State guy. Yeah, I am. And, of course, I'm always going to show love to my folks, my Penn State brethren. What's up? We are. That's what we do. But I thought that when Monte Nicholson was injured and Troy Apke came in, I thought Troy Apke played very well. I thought he and Landon Collins looked like more of a natural complement because Troy plays within himself. And I don't care how people take that. You can take that I'm throwing shade at Monte. I'm not. But I just know Monte's more of a freelancer back there. Apke plays within himself. And I thought that he and Landon Collins just were more of a natural fit together. Is that enough for him to start next year? Is that enough for them not to bring back Monte Nicholson? I don't think Monte will be back here next year. That's just my own opinion. I've been wrong before. I may be wrong again, but I don't think he comes back next year. The young man has a lot of things going on with him, too, that I'd like to see addressed before football becomes more important, because it's not. We're not going to get into that, not on today's show. There'll be room and time for that at some other time to discuss, his situation. But the Redskins perhaps may need to look at a safety as well. So several different positions, several different things they're going to have to look at. It'll be interesting to see what they do at quarterback. Alex Smith wants to play again. The odds of that this year, long shot, they're really a long shot. I wouldn't bet against him ever playing again, but for this year, it's a long shot. So you have Dwayne Haskins, who I think is the quarterback right now for long term for the Redskins anyway. But perhaps, you want to see who his backup's going to be. Who's going to be the guy? Will it be a Case Keenum? Do you bring him back? I don't think Colt McCoy will be back here under any circumstances. So perhaps the Redskins are going to have to look at a backup quarterback to be in that offense, with Dwayne Haskins. So it'll be interesting. A lot of different things, but we're going to wrap up today's episode of After Practice with myself, Lake Lewis. We normally take this about 35 minutes or so, 30 minutes, and we'll wrap it up. So obviously, as I mentioned before, check us out. You can subscribe to this on your major podcast carrier, Apple Music, Spotify, iHeartRadio, to name a few. You can also check out the video of this on demand on sportsjourney.com. And remember, you can check me out on social media at Lake Lewis on Twitter, Lake Lewis Jr. on Instagram and Facebook. And then, of course, check out the good work of all my good folks over at sportsjourney.com, the new 2L Media Group. That's right. That's what we're going with now. So check us out. We always appreciate all your support and fan feedback out there. So as always, folks, have a good one. Be safe.